Well, as you continue this remarkable book, we're well into it. This is chapter 6. There's a long review of the contemporary literature, which is quite fascinating and important, that Symonds engages in the first parts of the book. I left it out because it's not, well, we had to leave some parts of it out to make the readings manageable. But though that literature, which interestingly enough, was none of it was in English, it was in Italian, French, German. Continental Europe was much more open to talking about homosexuality than England was. And their laws were different. The French, as far as my reading of Symonds' account goes, the French never made homosexuality a crime. It was considered a moral matter, yes, but not a legal one. The literature that he reviews regards it either in a legal or criminological way, the phenomenon of homosexuality, or a medical way. And that's what he's just done, is gone through Ulrichs and Krafft-Ebing on male homosexuality. And then in this remarkable letter, this anonymous letter written by an Urning. Now, Urning is just the term that Symonds adopts, I believe, from Ulrichs to just describe a gay man. It didn't stick. I mean, that term didn't, gay man, homosexual man. But we would say an Urning is just a gay man. This remarkable letter that he quotes, that apparently some Englishman wrote to Krafft-Ebing, a German doctor, which is really an incredible thing to think that in the late 18th century that somebody would write something like this, even anonymously, which really is a peek into what it's like to be gay in the 1800s, to be a gay man at least. And the thrust of it, as Symonds says here at the top, it may not be superfluous to append the protest of an Urning against that solution of the problem. That is, the idea that the phenomenon is morbid. Morbid meaning that it's a symptom of sickness, that homosexuality is a disease that people are afflicted with, from which they would like to be cured. That to be gay, something is medically wrong with you, and that's the idea that Symonds here, I think, through quoting this letter, is trying to refute. That is, as the letter writer says, he says here, still, while I believe that this view is the most favorable for us in the present state of things, I am unable, in the interest of science, to accept the term morbid without qualification, and venture to suggest some further distinctions bearing on the central difficulties of the problem. That is, what this letter writer is trying to do is obviously written by a gay man, trying to describe what it's like to be gay at that time, and to try to refute the idea that to be gay is to be sick. To try to refute the idea that to be gay is to be the victim of some sort of psychological or biological illness. And what follows is just a remarkable summary of what it's like. I mean, you can read it for yourself. The way in which gay men, when they discover their sexuality as young people, are then sort of thrust into a world which is not only very confusing, but very dangerous, in which secrecy and loneliness seem to be the only ways of coping. And the suggestion is that if gay men do exhibit more neurotic or psychological disorders than the normal person, it's not because they're gay, it's because of what happens to them because they're gay, which is a pretty amazing thing to be said in the 19th century. It may seem kind of common sense to us that people who are marginalized, people who are persecuted, people who live in fear tend to exhibit the effects of that. that it has an effect on them. That it's just constant stress. I suppose that it's not all that different from being any kind of persecuted minority. Like, I mean, I'm going to stretch here and say, what is it like to be black in the USA? I mean, well, you're exposed to different sort of pressures and perhaps more pressures, and isn't that going to be a stress on you? Well, imagine being gay, merely as being a gay man in the end of the 19th century, the kind of stresses that he describes. That even if you find somebody to be with, you still have to hide it, and really, it's quite an amazing document. I think, of course, this is not written by Symonds, as he suggests. It was written by an anonymous letter writer to a German psychiatrist, basically. But a pretty amazing letter to the world, as Addington says at the end. This is powerfully and temperately written. It certainly is. Kind of a defense of the gay man, and really a call. I mean, it's kind of, I'll ask you a question in the review questions, and that is, if the letter writer doesn't think that, or if the letter writer is looking, looking for a cure. The cure isn't a medical cure or a psychiatric cure. The cure is a social cure, because the obvious implication is that the solution to the problem of gay men is to stop persecuting gay men, which was a pretty amazing thing to be saying in the English language, at least in the 19th century, I think.